Did you know the exposure triangle has a fourth side? What craziness do I speak of? What contortion of geometry is this? Well, stay tuned as we talk about how sometimes the exposure triangle can also be a square. My name is Timothy Reese, and I've worked in the television, film, and photography world as a director of photography and a photographer for nearly 20 years. Check out my videos as we cover not only the how, but also the why of various technical and creative techniques used in the creation of real images. We all know the big three: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. But if you've ever been outside in broad daylight trying to keep your shutter speed cinematic or your aperture wide open for shallow depth of field, you know that sometimes those three controls just aren't enough. The exposure triangle refers to controls we have within the camera itself, but we get a fourth control when we add another tool, and that is the sometimes boring but almighty neutral density filter. At its core, a neutral density filter, from here on simply referred to as ND, is like putting sunglasses on your lens. Not the ones that make the world look all cool blue or orange like most Michael Bay films, but just the simple dark ones. ND reduces the amount of light entering the camera without affecting color, sharpness, or contrast, theoretically at least. But by doing this, you gain control over the other three exposure variables so that you can use a shutter speed for appropriate motion reproduction, a wider aperture for shallower depth of field, and the appropriate ISO setting for your log footage even in bright conditions. It's a deceptively simple piece of glass that gives you back choice when using the exposure controls of the triangle in bright environments. ND filters come in all shapes and sizes. There are the circular filter types. These are the most affordable and screw directly onto the filter threads on the front of your lens. However, they are slow to change, and if you're using multiple lenses with different thread sizes, you'll need step-up rings or multiple filters. What happens when you take two circular polarized filters and screw them together opposing each other? You get another circular ND filter option called the variable ND filter, or VND for short. By twisting opposing polarizer filters, you can control the density of the filter. This is not without compromise though, as you will usually have a minimum strength of 2 stops, and at stronger settings, issues like polarization effects, cross patterns, or color shifts can occur. To prevent this, when shopping for a VND, get one that has hard stops. This can help prevent you from making it so dark that these anomalies occur. Also, since a VND is not really ND, watch out for a color cast that might appear when using one. Now, despite all these drawbacks, a VND, when used with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, can be an extremely useful type of ND in run and gun and documentary situations where lighting conditions constantly fluctuate. On the higher end of the spectrum, ND filters can also come in large flat pieces of glass, like 4x4 or 4x5.65 inches. These are used inside of a matte box, can be changed more quickly, are of the highest quality, but can also be the most expensive option. The benefit to using filters like these is that you don't need a different set for lenses that have different filter thread sizes, and there's no need for step-up rings like with circular filters. The downside, besides the cost, is the need for a matte box, but there are now many small affordable options. As you get into more high-end professional cameras, many will have one of 2 different options for built-in ND filters. The first being a filter wheel that sits behind the lens but in front of the sensor. This lets you choose between a number of fixed strengths without the need to attach anything to the front of the lens. This is a fast and efficient option. And here's where it gets even more exciting. Within the last few years, the rise of built-in electronic ND has revolutionized built-in ND in cameras. This technology sits in the same place as the internal ND filter wheel, but it uses a transparent crystal LCD screen that can be made more or less opaque by controlling the voltage applied to it. Not only does this give a huge range of ND filter strength options, they can be fine-tuned and opens up the ability for auto exposure on cameras without relying on changing the shutter or aperture for exposure adjustments. ND filters come in different strengths or densities. There are 3 ways that your filter might be labeled to show this. 2 are very common, and the third you may find on VND filters. The first is the traditional photography style of labeling, which shows how much the light is reduced with each filter. So for example, an ND2 would equal half the amount of light, and ND4 a fourth amount of light, and ND8 an eighth amount of light, and so on. In the cinema and video world, ND is often listed as a decimal of optical density, where each 0.3 equals a reduction of one stop of light. For this system, you have ND 0.3, reducing light by one stop, ND 0.6, reducing light by two stops, ND 0.9, reducing light by three stops, and it goes on from there. This system is handy as the one-stop increments correlate well with how the shutter and aperture controls work in the exposure triangle. So for example, if you are shooting at 1/120th of a shutter, but would rather be at 1/60th, you know that cutting the shutter speed in half would result in an increase of one stop of exposure. To compensate, you would just add a ND 0.3 to the front of your lens, or dial it in with a filter wheel or electronic ND.
The third and final way you might see ND strengths listed on a filter is similar to the cine or video style, where instead of ND 0.3 or 0.6, it will literally just say the number of stops the light has been cut, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stops.
ND filters might not be as fun and flashy as color gradients, star, or streak filters, but they should be an essential part of any kit. Before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with a couple of user tips. Number 1, ND is not just for use outside. If you're in an environment where you want to minimize the effect of the ambient light, but can't shut any of it off, you can overwhelm it with your own lights, and then use ND to minimize the effect on the other practical lighting, and bring your lighting levels back up to where you want them with your own lights. Number 2, test your filters for color casts so you know if you need to re-white balance your camera after changing or adding filters. This is especially true with VND. And number 3, be careful when stacking multiple filters together, as this can lead to multiple reflections. I personally use the Firecrest Super Slim IR ND filters, no paid sponsorship here. They are only half as thick as normal filters, which enables me to put 2 of them in the same filter tray, thereby minimizing reflections when I'm stacking filters. And the last thing to know is when a filter is good enough for the job. If your camera does not have built-in ND or electronic ND and you need to use external filters, although cinema style ND glass is superior, sometimes it's not practical compared to a VND. At the end of the day, it's important to get the shot, and depending on what you're shooting, cumbersome filters could slow you down and result in you missing moments. So there you have it, the hidden fourth control lever of exposure, ND filters. They may just look like tinted glass, but they give you the freedom to keep your shutter, aperture, and ISO exactly where you want them, regardless of the ambient light levels. If you like these videos, please subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment about a future video you might want me to make. This user feedback really helps me see what users are looking for and ensures I can continue to make helpful and educational videos. Until next time, thanks for watching.